there's a fun little phrase. Whatever you're not up on, you're going to be down on. And the reality of it is that most people, if they don't know it, they're going to be pessimistic about it. It's not until we really get to understand what's going on that we begin to become more gracious towards, say, people. A lot of us assume that this person's like this because that's the way they walk or the way they dress or the way they react. But until we get to know their story, then we get to be a little bit more optimistic because we realize all that's going on in their life. And the same goes for subjects, same goes for religions, the same goes for all kinds of stuff. It's not until we actually know what's going on that we can begin to be more gracious.
Because it takes effort, and it takes effort on someone's end to be able to understand that concept. And so not only do you have to go to the mental work of that, but if it's something you don't connect with, it makes it even harder to get to that spot. For example, there's people in my life that I think I don't understand at all. And so I think I can be shorter with them when I talk with them, when I interact with them. But when I understand maybe where they're coming from or what they've gone through in life, it makes it that much easier to be able to understand like what they're thinking, why they think that way, and the way that they are. Especially with my wife, like she thinks a certain way. Like a good example of this, she loves spending time with me, right? For myself, I like my space, and so there's a part of me that doesn't understand that concept of always wanting to be with me, right? But what I've understood about my wife is because her dad passed away at the age of 14, she really values time. And so being that I understand that concept, that because her dad passed away, she really values time and thinks life is really short. Now I have a greater understanding of where she's coming from when she says, I'd love to do something this weekend, like go to the beach or hang out or whatever. That makes me even more attentive to that and more aware of like she really does want to hang out, and I know the reason behind that.
I wouldn't call them rules. I would call them ways to live life. It'd be like basketball, saying to somebody, hey, here's the rules to basketball, here's how you're going to play basketball. You need to shoot the ball in the opponent's hoop. And you go, no, I don't want to do that, I'm going to shoot the ball in my own hoop. And someone goes, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? That's not how you play basketball. That's not the rules to basketball. It's not the way to live, that's not the way to do basketball. And the same goes for the Bible. The Bible gives us specific rules, if you call it, but really it's the way to really live life, how God has intended you to live. And so for myself, I want to strive to live that life. Can I do it perfectly? No. But do I try my best? Yes. That's kind of in short how to answer that question to some degree.
Definitely not. I definitely don't follow the rules of the Bible, and I don't think that it's meant to be a book of following rules and not following rules. I think the Bible is something greater than that, bigger than that. I think it's different narratives describing how God redeems us, how He changes lives, and how I think He reconciles all things to Himself, including our lives, our relationships with others, and I think creation as well. So no, I definitely don't follow the rules, and I don't think it's intended to be that. That's how to answer that.
A major thing about the Old Testament, specifically in Leviticus, is that there are over 600 laws. Lots of laws. So the question then is, are all those laws for us today? No, they're not. There are 3 sections to those laws. There are ceremonial laws, there are governmental laws, and then there are moral laws. When it comes to the ceremonial laws, like the verse you just read, that section really has to do with God saying to His people, I want you to be holy like I am holy. In other words, I want you to be set apart from all the other tribes. So what you're going to do is you're not going to wear garments that mix stuff. You're not going to mark yourself up with tattoos. You're going to be circumcised, which is like, what? Why? Because He wanted them to not be like everyone else. He wanted them to stand out, because if they stood out and they did great things, then God would be made famous through them. So when it comes to the ceremonial laws, we don't abide by those laws anymore because Jesus came along, he died on a cross, and he rose again for us. And when he did that, we are now made holy through what Jesus has done. We are not made holy by wearing certain things, by doing certain things that Leviticus says. We're made holy because of Jesus. Then there's governmental laws that you read about. Those we don't abide by those because we're not under their government anymore. We abide by what the government says. Although a lot of things they say aren't that great anyways, but we abide by them. And then there's the moral law, which transcends the Old Testament into the New Testament, which, to be honest, even if you're not a Christian, you're still going to abide by that law, by most of those laws, because, well, it's just the right thing to do. Like, don't murder people. That makes sense. Don't commit adultery. That makes sense. And then there's other things like honor God above everything else. And these rules are really the way to live life. The moral law is the way to live life. You can look at them as the 10 commandments, but I look at them as more like the 10 directives to life. So in all of that, that's kind of the summary of those laws. You can get really caught up in them, but you got to understand that some are for then and some are for now, or some have always been. And the reality is that we are still bound by the moral law, and that's really the way that we're supposed to live life. Don't steal, don't cheat, don't murder. Honor God above everything else, because you don't want to create your own idols, because that gets weird too. And so on and so forth. Oh, also, honor your mother and father. That's one in there too. You do that, you're probably going to live a longer life than you expect.
So I don't think that they're meant to be followed. Kind of going back to my first answer, I think that there are things in place, right? So the 10 Commandments, they're in place not as essentially you have to follow these per se, but are they good things to follow? Yeah, I mean they really are. There's some good things in those, and I think there's things that God kind of sets up as buffer zones so that we don't go past them. For example, like it talks about maybe not getting drunk, right? And so we think of that as maybe legalistic. Why can't we do that? But in essence, in a lot of ways, those things are in place so that they don't overtake our lives. Because the Bible doesn't talk about not drinking. You can totally drink of age, but yeah, so I think some of them are in place so that it keeps us in check. Because I think human beings are always looking to push it further or allow things to come into their lives that fill those voids that I think that God can only fill. And that can go for money, that can go for anything, you name it.
I said before, the unnecessary laws are the ceremonial laws, because Jesus, what he did on the cross, he has done away with those things. It's the whole point of the ceremonial laws were for people to be holy or set apart for God, but because of what Jesus did on the cross, he is now the means of becoming set apart. Jesus makes it very clear that the reason why he's dying is so that we can be with him, set apart from sin and with him forever. So he is the reason that we abide by, he is the reason why we focus on him and want to follow him. The governmental laws, again, we're not bound by those. We're bound by our governmental laws. So that is null and void. And then lastly, the moral laws. Those are the laws that we do abide by. But again, they're not really laws. It's really how you're supposed to live your life. Because if you don't live that way, then you're not really living life as you're supposed to. Just like playing basketball. If you don't play basketball the right way, then you're not going to be playing basketball at all. It just doesn't work.
Two ways I would answer that. One is, I think if we avoid the position of looking at rules to follow and not to follow, I think we can figure that out our whole lifetime. And I think that would change over time. Whereas maybe at one season in life, this is really important, and this rule you follow, you just got to stick with it, and this one maybe not. So maybe that flips over time. Again, I don't think it's a book that's intended to be rules. You either break or you don't break, because we're going to break them all. So that's just going to be a bad cycle. So, as opposed to looking at it that way as far as rules to follow and what to follow, I think if we follow the teachings of Jesus, I think that makes it simpler, you know. Jesus often talks about how he's against the religious leaders of the New Testament, because they were always about the law. Like, you don't do this, you do this. They had 24 plus laws for the Sabbath, right? So Jesus comes along and basically says you're missing the whole point. Like the Sabbath day is for you to rest, to slow down, right? So that, man, in the weeks to come for my own life, I'm able to tackle those better. I'm more attentive to my wife when I do take a Sabbath, right? And so they had 24 laws about how precisely they should have done it, right? And that misses the point. Same with following like the Bible. Like if we're just focusing on the do's and don'ts, I think we've completely missed the whole point of Jesus' message. That's how I'd answer that one.